Vance stared at the grainy security footage, her breath hitching as the cardboard box simply materialized on her doorstep out of thin air. There was no old man, no footprints in the fresh snow, and no logical explanation for how a dying veteran's gift bypassed every high-tech sensor her FBI training relied on. This isn't just a story about a dog. It is a chilling unraveling of a truth that defies the laws of physics and the boundaries of human sacrifice. Please subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the very last sentence to witness this miracle. Drop a comment with the city you are watching from so I can see how far this incredible journey has traveled. The heater in the black FBI SUV hummed with a futile persistence, failing to drown out the rhythmic ache in Vance's shattered knee. She gripped the steering wheel, her amber-green eyes scanning the drifting Denver snow, searching for a ghost of the life she had lost in a warehouse explosion months ago. "Just move, Maya," she whispered to herself, her voice raspy from exhaustion. "It's just a leg. It's just paperwork." Across the street, near the skeletal remains of the old train station, a figure emerged from the white curtain of the storm. Elias Thorne, 70 years old and thinned by decades of hunger, trudged through the drifts with a desperate, shaky resolve. He clutched a cardboard box to his torn military coat as if it held the last embers of his own soul. "Easy now, little soldier," Elias murmured into the box, his breath a puff of silver in the freezing air. "You've got a whole world waiting for you. Don't you dare quit on me now." Maya leaned closer to the windshield, her analytical mind twitching. Why was an old man in a patched wool scarf approaching a secure suburban mansion in a blizzard? She watched him reach the front gate, his steps uneven but intentional, guided by a force she couldn't yet name. He set the box down on the stone step and brushed the snow from its top with a tenderness that made Maya's chest tighten. Elias pulled a blunt pencil from his pocket, scribbling words onto a scrap of paper with hands that trembled violently. "You'll walk for her," he whispered, his voice a prayer lost to the wind. "He will walk for you." He reached up, his fingers lingering on the doorbell, and the chime echoed faintly inside the house. Maya threw open the SUV door, her boots crunching into the fresh ice, but the cold hit her lungs like a physical blow. "Hey, wait!" she shouted, her voice swallowed by the roar of the gale. By the time she reached the gate, the sidewalk was a blank sheet of white. There were no footprints. There was no silhouette retreating into the trees. Elias Thorne had vanished, as if the storm had erased his very existence. Maya knelt by the box, her knee throbbing with a dull, white-hot heat. Inside, a tiny German shepherd puppy with watery brown eyes looked up at her, its small chest rising and falling in quick, weak breaths. She picked up the note, the ink smudging under her thumb. "He will walk for you," she read aloud, a chill running up her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "How?" she breathed, looking toward the empty street. How could he know? Inside the mansion, the security detail scrambled to pull up the feed from the front gate. Maya stood behind them, her arms crossed tightly, her mind already cataloging the impossibility of what she had seen. "Play it back," she commanded, her voice steady despite the ringing in her ears. The video flickered to life, showing the empty gate and the steady fall of snow. Then, without a single frame of transition, the cardboard box simply appeared on the stone step. There was no Elias, there was no movement. The world had simply blinked, and the dog was there. "Where's the man?" the lead guard asked, his voice thick with a sudden superstitious dread. There was no man, the technician whispered, his face pale in the glow of the monitors. Look at the snow. It's undisturbed. There aren't even footprints leading to the box. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. A cold stillness filled the room, heavier than the blizzard outside. And if no one brought the dog to the gate, then who had rung the bell? It's a glitch, Maya snapped, though she didn't believe it. Check the infrared. Check the perimeter sensors. Everything is green, Agent Vance, the guard replied. According to the system, nothing has crossed that gate all night. The puppy, whom she had already begun to call Shadow, padded across the hardwood floor and rested his small paw on the toe of her boot. It was an intentional gesture, a warm pressure that sent a strange, tingling sensation through her injured calf, the first spark of feeling she had felt in months. You and I were connected, aren't we? She murmured, looking into the dog's expressive eyes. Shadow let out a soft whine. His ears perked as if he were listening to an emotion she hadn't yet admitted to herself. Maya shut her laptop. The impossible footage burned into her retinas. She knew coincidences were a luxury her profession didn't allow. The next morning, she pushed her wheelchair through the icy neighborhood. Her navy winter coat zipped to her chin as she questioned the residents. Did you see an older man? Gray beard? Military jacket? She asked Mr. Stevenson, a neighbor with tired eyes. No one, he replied, leaning on his porch railing. The snow was too heavy. Nobody in their right mind was out last night. Maya returned to the mansion, her frustration mounting. She studied the damp cardboard box on her table, searching for a shipping print or a serial number. There was nothing but the note. He will walk for you, she whispered again, the words feeling like a contract signed in a different world. She watched Shadow nap by her feet, noticing how he reacted to distant footsteps on the sidewalk before they even registered to her ears. He was a working dog, born with a tuning that defied standard canine behavior. Who sent you? She asked the empty room, but only the hum of the heater answered. She began to scour the city, searching for the man who didn't exist on camera, but whose pencil marks were still etched into the scrap of paper in her pocket. She visited homeless camps under the bridges and warming shelters near the station, driven by a thread of fate she couldn't ignore. He's a kind man, Leah Thompson, a receptionist at a rescue clinic, told her later that week. Gives away his food even when he's starving. But he's been sick, Agent Vance. Really sick. Where is he? Maya asked, her heart tightening with an odd mixture of admiration and guilt. You could try the shelter on 12th, Leah suggested. He kept asking if the puppy was safe. When Maya reached the shelter, the air smelled of disinfectant and faded hope. Nora Bennett, a former nurse, led her toward a back room. He came in nearly frozen, Nora whispered. Severe respiratory infection. He's been holding on by a thread. Maya pushed open the door and saw him, Elias Thorne, his frame smaller than she remembered, his skin pale beneath a silver beard. Shadow bounded forward, his tail wagging with a rhythmic joy as he whined at the foot of the cot. Elias opened his eyes, a weak but unmistakable relief washing over his weathered face. There you are, little soldier, Elias whispered, his voice a gravelly rasp. Maya stepped closer, her mind churning with the impossibility of it all. The man lying before her, barely able to lift his head, could not have survived the blizzard. He could not have vanished from the cameras. Thomas, she said, her voice trembling. How did you get to my house that night? You were dying. Elias looked at her for a long moment, his eyes dark and deep with a memory that didn't belong to the physical world. I don't remember, he whispered. I only remember the cold and wanting him to be safe. I only wanted you to walk again. Elias's raspy, labored breathing drifted into the stifling atmosphere of the hospital room, leaving Maya standing there with 1,000 questions swarming through her mind. She looked down at the old man's thin, skeletal hand, and then at Shadow, who was gently licking those trembling fingers with absolute, unwavering loyalty. A powerful surge of intuition compelled Maya to decide that she could not let her benefactor end his life in the cold isolation of this rescue shelter. Despite his weak protests that he didn't want to be a burden, she insisted on making the medical arrangements to bring Elias back to her mansion. During those first few days in their new home, Elias spent most of his time silently observing Shadow assist Maya through her agonizing physical therapy sessions. Whenever Maya stumbled or buckled under the sharp pain of her crippled knee, Shadow would instantly lunge forward, using his small but sturdy body as a bracing point for her to stand firm. Sitting in his armchair, Elias's eyes sparkled with a quiet pride as he saw his prophecy beginning to manifest. One morning, Doctor, Riker gasped in astonishment as he watched Shadow use his muzzle to press firmly against a specific pressure point on Maya's leg. Immediately, a spark of nerve activation, previously thought to be clinically dead, surged through her, making Maya shudder in shock. That's a breakthrough, Maya. This dog isn't just observing. He is directly treating you, Riker affirmed, unable to believe his own eyes. Maya turned to Elias, her voice thick with emotion. How did you know Shadow could do this? The old man smiled, his clouded eyes staring off into the white blanket of snow outside the window. I didn't choose him for you. He chose you long before we ever met. That cryptic answer sent a chill down Maya's spine, reminding her of the traceless security footage and the inexplicable appearance of the box that night. Driven by her bureau instincts, she decided to access the FBI's top-secret archives to dig into Elias Thorne's military records, hoping for a logical explanation. The result that flashed on the screen caused Maya to nearly drop her laptop. Elias was not just a rescue veteran. He had been her father's closest partner on a classified mission where both were officially reported as killed in action. The truth about Elias's identity and the blood link to her father's past began to bleed into the light, transforming pure gratitude into a haunting fear of the conspiracies still lurking in the shadows. Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the blue light of the encrypted FBI database reflecting in her eyes like a cold, digital fire. The name Elias Thorne wasn't just a record anymore. It was a ghost haunting her family's bloodline. She stared at the classified file, through her heart hammering against her ribs as the words, "Killed in action," blurred on the screen next to a photograph of a younger Elias standing beside her father. He was there, she whispered into the empty, darkened office, the realization chilling her more than the Denver winter ever could. He was with my father when the world thought they both burned. Shadow let out a soft, knowing whine from his spot by her feet, his ears perking as if he could hear the gears of a decades-old conspiracy grinding back to life. Maya slammed the laptop shut and limped toward the guest room, her forearm crutches clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor, a sound that usually filled her with frustration, but now felt like a war drum. She pushed open the door to find Elias sitting upright in bed, his silver beard illuminated by the pale moonlight, his eyes already fixed on her as if he had been waiting for this exact moment of confrontation. "You were his partner, Elias," Maya said, her voice a jagged blade of accusation and desperation. The records say you died in that warehouse in Eastern Europe, the same place my father was labeled a traitor. Elias exhaled a long, shaky breath that seemed to carry the weight of 30 years of silence. He didn't deny it. He only reached out a trembling hand to pet Shadow, who had instantly hopped onto the mattress to offer support. Traitors are made by those who write the history books, Maya, Elias replied, his voice a gravelly rasp that cracked with the strain of a long-buried truth. Your father didn't run away from that explosion. He was pushed into it by the very men who gave him his medals. Maya felt the room tilt, the grounding presence of the mansion suddenly feeling like a fragile cage. She knelt beside the bed, ignoring the sharp protest in her knee. Tell me everything, she commanded, her FBI training surging to the surface. Tell me why you brought this dog to me and how you knew I was the one who needed him. Elias looked at her, his dark eyes deep with a memory that transcended logic. He spoke of a secret unit, of missing funds that were never stolen but hidden, and of a man named Vincent Crane who had built an empire on her father's ruins. Shadow isn't just a dog, Maya. He's a legacy, Elias whispered, his fingers tangling in the pup's thick fur. He was bred from the same line that served with us, a line trained to see the wounds that doctors miss. The mini-climax hit her like a physical blow. The dog wasn't a coincidence. He was a living medical tool designed to bring her back to the fight so she could finish what her father started. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic click echoed from the hallway, the sound of a window being pried open with professional precision. Shadow's head snapped toward the door, his low growl vibrating through the bed frame, his hackles rising in a jagged line of black fur. Maya didn't hesitate. She reached for the sidearm she kept hidden in her nightstand, her pulse climbing as she realized Crane's men hadn't just been watching her. They were moving in for the kill. Stay low, Elias, she hissed, her voice cold and lethal. She moved toward the door with a grace she hadn't felt since before the injury. Her crutches abandoned as she leaned on her own rekindled strength. A shadow crossed the threshold, showing a silhouette in a dark, tactical jacket that mirrored her own. Maya didn't give him a chance to speak. She lunged forward, slamming the butt of her pistol into the intruder's jaw, the sound of bone meeting steel echoing through the quiet house. Shadow was a blur of tan and black, tackling a second man who had tried to enter through the balcony, his teeth sinking into the intruder's sleeve with relentless force. The fight was fast, savage, and silent. Maya felt the tingling in her leg flare into a white-hot spark of pure nerve activation as she stood her ground. You're late, she growled at the unconscious man on the floor, her eyes searching the darkness for more threats. But the silence that followed was even more terrifying. She turned back to the room to see Elias clutching a small, rusted metal box he had pulled from his worn military coat, a box that hadn't been there when she brought him home. The evidence is in here, Maya, Elias gasped, his face turning a ghostly shade of gray. The forged signatures, the bank transfers, the truth about the Crane family. He handed it to her, his fingers cold as ice, and as Maya took the box, she realized the major twist. Elias hadn't come to her house to be saved. He had come to pass the torch before his time ran out. The security monitors in the hallway surged to life, showing multiple black SUVs screaming toward the mansion, their headlights cutting through the snow like predatory eyes. They're coming for the box, aren't they? Maya asked, her jaw clenching as she realized the scale of the war she had just inherited. Elias nodded weakly, his eyes closing as the fever finally took hold of his frail body. He will walk for you, Maya, and you will run for us. Maya looked at Shadow, who was standing guard at the door, his tail wagging with a steady, rhythmic joy that seemed to defy the violence of the night. She tucked the box into her jacket and gripped her pistol, the phantom ringing in her knee replaced by a roar of purpose. She wasn't an injured agent anymore. She was the Harrington legacy's last standing soldier. The front door burst open with a deafening crash, the sound of glass shattering and boots thundering on the floorboards. Maya didn't run. She took a true step forward, her legs trembling with possibility rather than weakness. The mansion, once a sanctuary of loneliness, was now a battlefield, and as the first flash bang detonated in the foyer, Maya realized that miracles don't just happen. They are fought for. The front door disintegrated under the force of a tactical breach, the explosion of glass and splintered oak signaling that the shadows of the past had finally caught up to the present. Maya ignored the white-hot flare of agony in her knee, her body moving with a lethal fluidity she hadn't felt since the warehouse blast. "He's not just a veteran. He's the key to everything," she screamed over the sudden high-pitched ringing in her ears, her hand tightening around the rusted metal box Elias had surrendered. Shadow was a blur of tan and black, his adolescent frame transformed into a shield of muscle and teeth as he intercepted a masked intruder at the bedroom threshold. The lead operative stumbled, his suppressed rifle clattering to the floor as Shadow's jaws locked onto his forearm with a precision that was more than instinct. It was destiny. "Get him out of here, Maya. The bridge. The Shadow Bridge is the only way." Elias gasped, his lungs rattling with a fever that seemed to burn hotter as the house fell into chaos. Maya didn't hesitate. She scooped up the dog and pulled the elderly man toward the narrow servants' staircase, her legs trembling with a newfound, terrifying strength. As they reached the darkness of the lower hall, the major twist hit her like a physical blow. The security monitors weren't just showing Crane's men. They were showing local police units being diverted away by a higher authority. "They don't want to capture us, Elias. They want to erase us," she hissed, her analytical mind piecing together the terrifying reach of the conspiracy. A flashbang detonated in the kitchen, the blinding light momentarily stripping the world of color, but Shadow's paw pressed firmly against Maya's boot, the grounding pressure guiding her through the sensory void. She fired a single calculated shot into the ceiling to create a distraction, the roar of the weapon a declaration that the Harrington legacy would not go quietly into the night. "You walk for me, Shadow. Now show me where he's hiding," she commanded, her voice a jagged rasp of desperation and hope. The dog didn't head for the exit. He pulled them toward the library, his nose tracking a scent that defied the smoke and gunpowder filling the air. Behind them, the thundering boots of the extraction team grew louder, their red laser sights slicing through the haze like the eyes of hungry wolves. Maya gripped the metal box against her chest, the forged signatures inside a weight that could either save her soul or bury it beneath the Denver snow. Maya lunged through the library's heavy oak doors, just as a barrage of gunfire shredded the rare manuscripts behind her. She didn't look back, her focus locked on the rhythmic clicking of Shadow's claws on the marble as he guided her toward a bookshelf that didn't quite meet the ceiling. "The lever, Elias! Where is the damn lever?" she hissed, her breath hitching as she shoved the elderly man into the shadows of the alcove. Elias, his face a ghostly mask of sweat and silver beard, reached out with a trembling hand to press a hidden catch disguised as a brass sconce. A section of the wall groaned and swung inward, revealing a cramped, lightless passage that smelled of damp earth and old secrets. They scrambled inside just as a flashbang detonated in the library, the overpressure slamming the secret door shut and plunging them into a suffocating darkness. Maya leaned against the cold stone, her injured knee screaming in a white-hot protest that threatened to black out her vision. Shadow didn't bark. He simply pressed his warm, sturdy flank against her shin, his presence a grounding force that allowed her to find her center amidst the chaos. "We have to move, Elias. If they find the hatch, this tunnel becomes a tomb," she whispered, her fingers tightening around the cold, rusted metal of the evidence box. The tunnel led them 3 blocks away to the basement of the old train station, a place Elias had known when he was nothing more than a ghost wandering the Denver streets. As they emerged into the freezing night air, the major twist hit Maya like a physical blow. The black SUVs weren't just following them, they were already waiting. A spotlight cut through the falling snow, pinning Maya and Elias against the brickwork like insects under a microscope. "Give us the box, Agent Vance, and the old man might live to see another sunrise," a voice boomed. It was Elliot Crane himself, stepping out of the Lade vehicle with a silenced pistol held with a businessman's chilling precision. Maya felt the rage flare in her chest, a heat that finally eclipsed the pain in her leg. She looked at Elias, whose eyes held a quiet, sacrificial peace. "The Shadow Bridge doesn't end with you, Crane. It's already out," Maya roared, her voice a jagged rasp of defiance. She didn't reach for her gun. She reached for Shadow's harness, feeling the dog's muscles coil like a spring. With a guttural command, she sent the dog forward, not as a weapon, but as a distraction. Shadow was a blur of tan and black in the strobe-lit snow, weaving through the legs of the tactical team with a speed that defied their infrared sights. In the chaos, Maya lunged for Crane, her legs finding a strength that doctors had called impossible just months prior. She tackled the billionaire into a snowbank, her fingers clawing for the weapon as they tumbled into the dark. "My father died for your father's lies, and I am the one who's going to collect the debt," she screamed, slamming her forearm into Crane's throat. A second major twist erupted as the sirens finally converged. But they weren't the local units Crane had subverted. They were federal internal affairs, led by Dr. Riker, who had been more than just a physical therapist all along. The lights of the federal convoy turned the snowy night into a brilliant neon battlefield. Crane was dragged away in handcuffs, his expensive coat stained with the grime of the streets he had looked down upon. Maya sank into the snow, her chest heaving, as Shadow returned to her side and licked the sweat from her forehead. Elias Thorne stood over them, his silver hair catching the light like a crown, no longer a broken soldier, but a man who had finally brought his brother's daughter home. "You walked for him, Shadow," Thomas murmured, his voice thick with a pride that had been 50 years in the making. The Shadow Bridge project didn't just pair dogs with veterans. It became a fortress where the truth could never be buried again. As the sun rose over a quiet Denver, Maya Harper took her first step without a crutch, a true, independent step, fueled by the loyalty of a dog and the sacrifice of a forgotten hero. Miracles don't arrive with thunder. They arrive in the silence of a winter night, carried by those brave enough to walk through the storm until the world is whole again. The Harrington legacy is no longer a ghost. It is the light that will guide every broken soul back to the shore.